Namaste to everyone, including the wonderful being that is sitting before me, Beata ALFÖLDI. But to all of you tuning in, whether you're viewing or listening, whatever you may be doing on our threefold platform, namely Spotify, YouTube, and of course Apple, you are most welcome, and namaste, namaste to you. You're in for an absolute delight because we have this remarkable person sitting before us who is going to share the wisdom, oh, deep, deep, deep wisdom of her life experience. And, you know, I've been party to not being absolutely intimate because we've been living on different continents, but observing, experiencing in proxy Beata's extraordinary experience over the last 25, 30 years. And, you know, I am so proud to consider Beata as one of my friends because I feel that her work as a healer, as a medicine woman, as a ceremonialist is one of the most unique paths that I've had the joy of witnessing over the years. This is a lady who is completely and utterly authentic, as I know you will find. This is the third time that she's been on to the Deep Dialogue program. And both Ryan, my technical manager, and I always look forward. I've been feeling excited all day to the wonder of Beata ALFÖLDI. So let me share with you formally, and then we'll fall into conversation, who Beata is. Well, she has this fascinating name. Beata is a medicine woman, shamanic practitioner, sound healer, ceremonial leader, seer, author, keynote speaker with a gift for assisting individuals through a deep pathway of transformation. Beata created the Integral Woman program for Sydney Awareness Institute when she had just completed a 2-year diploma in shamanic and energetic healing before living in Peru. This is how authentic Beata is. She traveled to Peru and lived there studying with authentic indigenous healers of the Amazon and the Andes. Beata now creates transformational spaces that offer evolutionary opportunities for all people and is considered a spiritual midwife, helping people to birth their own unique authenticity. And I would just add that as a result of the work that she's been doing, particularly over the last 12 years, that this is an internationally sought after medicine woman of remarkable renown. And you'll see when you look at her website at some of the photographs that actually capture the deep, deep presence in her work. It is so moving to feel that Beata is evoking this level of presence and truth on our planet so that we may heal. Because, of course, within the sacred circle of her work, there's a resonance that pours out into the rest of the world, as you all know. So, there is, I've just improvised there, but within Beata's profound aptitude for, particularly for shadow work, she enables people to step into their fuller creative potential, to realize their infinite potential. And this particularly came about many years ago when she transformed her own life, or it was transformed for her by enormous grief, by the loss of her son, literally in childbirth. Beata now currently lives in the mountains of Sintra in Portugal, and yet travels internationally, workshopping her unique offering whilst living passionately through the inspiration of inspiring others to live a life that is authentic, free, empowered, and radiantly alive. Now, I could go on and on and on, extolling the virtue of this very beautiful lady that we have sitting before us. But welcome, welcome, welcome. And tell us where you are at the moment, because I know you're not in Sintra.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Stuart. You are such a sweetheart. I am actually in the motherland. I'm in Hungary at the moment with my beautiful niece who's visiting from Australia. And I have to say, there is something that happens, I don't know, for me, being a woman of the earth, that happens for me when I come back to the land of the ancestors. I just feel energetically that I'm being absolutely celebrated through all realms. It's like I can feel my mother and my grandmothers and my grandfathers, and they're so present. And I think for all of us, a part of living a meaningful life is also understanding our connection to our ancestors, both past, present, and future.
Astonishing. And yet, what's interesting, of course, is that we hear your vocal quality is that of an Australian. And so, tell us a
Mm.
little bit about what that uprooting was that your parents created to move to Australia. They moved as a result of economic hardship or war. What was the reason?
Well, at the time, Hungary was communist. And so this was 1970, between 1970 and 71. They escaped when I was 6 months old via Croatia to Italy. Italy was actually accepting a lot of refugees at that time. And my mother was so keen on living by the ocean and also so keen on moving as far away as she could from communism that she was the one that really led the ship and the family. She was pregnant with my brother all the way over to Australia with no money, no family, one suitcase, and not speaking the language, neither her, obviously, or my father. So it was so courageous. I mean, still to this day, even though she's not with us here in the physical anymore, she is the strongest woman that I've ever known and ever met in my life.
Wow. And
Mm.
Australia was a destination that was pre-planned, or it happened to arise out of the immigration facilitation that you were part of in Italy?
Well, there was an immigration facilitation. We could have gone to the United States. We could have landed in different parts of Europe as well as Canada. But for some reason, my mother really wanted to go to Australia. So, I just think it's extraordinary. Had she made a different choice, I would have had a very, very different life. And I'm so grateful that I grew up in that extraordinary country. And now I'm so grateful that I've come back to Europe because it feels like home. It really does.
Yeah, yeah. And it seems by your earlier comment that wherever you are, there is this unique communion with the supernatural, with the
Mm.
ancestral world of dear departed ones. And I dare say also because you're earthed so exquisitely within Mother Nature, within the Gaia, within Pachamama, with the elemental force as well. And this seems to be an important measure for you. It seems to foster and edify and inspire your life into a new form of creation. Would
Mm.
you say this to be true?
Absolutely. For me, really what happened with the loss of Alakai was this huge reopening and re-entering into the world of spirit and nature. And I'm so grateful for that experience because now everything is alive and everything, I can see the connection between everything,
Mm,
natural, supernatural, some things of the earth and things of spirit, beings of spirit on the earth. And this is I guess it's re-enchanted my life. And I feel for all of us when we go through these dark nights of the soul, as every one of us will at some point in life, there is always an opportunity to go through and right into that center of that pain to find the meaning of it. Once we've healed, once we've really healed that journey, there is always that gold, that essence of what it was, that gold within the dark night.
yeah, yeah. And did you when you referred to the being who died, we're talking about your son.
Yes.
And then, of course, your husband, your relationship also floundered, didn't it?
That's correct. 6 months afterwards, we divorced, and within 2 weeks of my son dying, my mother also was diagnosed with terminal cancer. So there was this cascade of, um, my goodness, what next? What
Mm,
what next is going to be
mm,
stripped away from me and from
mm,
the very well curated identity that I had invested in all my life. And I think for all of us, when we've really hit rock bottom and all of our identity is stripped away, we really come back to, well, what is real? What is real, and actually what is going to bring, and what is bringing my life meaning when I'm lost here in the dark. So it was a
And this,
great re-education and relearning of what is really true for me. What is really true for me, and what now? What would I like to create in my life?
wow. I'm spinning because of when you speak, I see many striations. I see many levels, and this the unseen ones, the sacred
Mm,
ones, come in to greet us. And
mm,
I know that you're going to be in London, where I am at the moment, during the month of August. And I was just thinking that there's a very dear friend of mine that I want you to meet, who went through a very similar extraordinary transition in her own life through the death of her two children who just died. Anyway, it's quite a story which I won't go into, but the level of grief that was the witness there, and it seems, and I'm sharing this with you because this is not necessarily a new thought, but certainly in this moment of exchange, it comes in as a breath of air. It seems that those like yourself and the person that I was referring to, whose name is Mary, um,
mm,
Irish mystic who lives in the United Kingdom, lives in London. And it seems that to truly evoke the vessel of transformative healing that you both are, that you're taken as women into this deep furrow, which is so primal and atavistic, where there is a seeming no return until you
mm,
eventually find a way of facing the ultimate, which is the core of the grief.
mm.
Did you did this happen for you in Australia, or was it when you got to South America?
No, I was actually in Australia at the time. So we look back on our lives, and you can see the karma of everything and the choice that each one of us make, right? And so, Alakai is a very, we're still very much connected,
Mm,
obviously,
mm,
in the world of spirit. And it's so interesting because his name came to me 3 days before I gave birth. And at the time, obviously, I didn't know he was going to die 3 days before his name came to me. It's a Hawaiian indigenous name, and it actually means spiritual guide.
uh-huh, uh-huh,
So
fascinating.
I extraordinary. I mean, he is literally one of my guides. And in order for me on some level to really connect with this soul
Mm,
on a very, very deep level, I needed to know him in a
mm,
very physical
mm,
way. So
mm,
it's just fascinating, the perfection of spirit. No matter how challenging our journeys are, I always go back to that awareness of the perfection of what we have all written before our incarnation, so that we
mm,
can re-remember who we really are.
mm, mm. You put it so beautifully. And I mean, the story just conjures up so much, or the experience, I should say, conjures up so much essence, the real core of who you are, who he is, but also because you're humanoid, of how we can relate to that.
Mm,
When you went right into
mm,
the very core of the loss, the grief, and possibly were in such a dark place that you didn't know how you would return to the light. I mean, I don't want you to have to share this if it's something that you would rather not, obviously, but I just feel the rawness and the authenticity of its very deep, primal, atavistic
mm,
quality
mm.
is so extraordinary. extraordinary to provide us with the courage of going into the darkness, into the shadow work, knowing full well that we always have some form of tethering to the
Mm.
light. What was the shifting point for you from the dark?
The shifting point for me was one night being a lady, a woman of ceremony and ritual, where I literally fell to my knees and just broke down and sobbed and sobbed and sobbed, stripped naked, and ended up doing a ceremony that I have no idea where I understood where this ceremony had come from. But I literally conjured all of my ancestors and all of my timelines in all the cardinal points, through all the cardinal points, to the earth, to the beings of the sky, and came back to the heart. So I literally called back all of my soul aspects through all time and space to be here in this moment of the present, because I thought, and I knew, not consciously, but afterwards, obviously, that in calling back and literally conjuring these aspects of the soul back to the present, that it was only in that moment of being so deep in the earth, so deep in the center of my pain, that I could start coming back, really bringing Beata, the Beata that you see here, back, and calling all those soul aspects back, not the personality, but the authentic blueprint of who I really am. And that was then the beginning of my return to self, the real authentic self that was there in a very distant past. So many pieces lost.
Mm. So in many ways, it was a completely transcendental experience, wasn't it? You know, moving into the physical, where you tore apart anything that was a vestige of now and entered
Mm,
into this communication with spirit, your spirit within and the spirit without, so to speak, because we
mm.
think the soul is within, whereas really within soul. So the entire telegraph, as it were, of that supernatural realm was speaking with you and leading you into the firmament.
Absolutely. I mean, I really set up a whole ritual space in my grief, in the madness of grief. I pulled out my drum and my rattles, and I really sung to the earth, to spirit. And it was in that moment when something cracked, that I felt that everything started to slowly come back. And then the pieces and the remembering, because for a long time I'd shut down my psychic gifts because I was terrified. I was absolutely terrified as a child. And then suddenly here I was being cracked open, literally,
Mm,
to the world of the unseen, and my
mm,
sense of smell, sense of claircognizance, and so many aspects of self that I had lost started to
mm,
come back. And here I wasn't afraid of them. I was welcoming them, because that, as you know, then we become the bridge between heaven and earth.
mm, mm. As you speak it, it is vivid in the way that your consciousness transmits it, the way that
Mm.
sound comes, that words come. So we feel the enormity of it. And so we see the purpose. Our conversation today is called Living a Deep and Meaningful Life. So that we
Mm.
see that actually the only way that we can acquire that quality of depth and meaning is if we are utterly true, not about the levity of life and the joy of life. Thank heavens we have these bounties, but at the same time, they're easy.
Yeah.
It's the darkest stuff when we're in true struggle, conflict and pain, and the level of courage that stripped you bare, so that, as you said, something cracked, which is
Mm.
fascinating. So weight, space and time became fused into nothingness, and there was a cracking of your consciousness, almost as though an egg was cracking, so that you could actually
Mm.
really tune into this extraordinary wisdom that I remember sharing with you way back before this experience when you were living in London. Amazing,
Mm.
amazing, amazing, amazing. And so for those people who may be listening in, who are drawn magnetically, psychically, by the quality of whatever we're creating in these moments, is there
Mm.
anything, is there, having gone through that experience, is there any succor? Are there any healing tokens, finding the right words, gifts that you may be able to provide anybody who is raw in their suffering at this moment?
Mm. I would say that allowing oneself to really feel and not distracting the process, not trying to get away from the pain or away from that feeling of utter despair is so important. And for me, nature was such a gift. Whether I was walking in the forest or if you're living near the ocean, for me, nature really is the great healer, because she continues to teach us that we're not separate from her. And if we really allow that process to mature, and I'm talking about the process of grief, if we really allow that process of what it is meant to awaken and ignite within us, inevitably, I will say to anyone who is suffering, anyone who is going through grief, that you will come through the other side of it, as did I, as we all do. But we have to fully go in first. Otherwise, there's always going to be this it's like this tiny thread that you're carrying, and there on the end of it is that grief that you didn't look at. And somehow it's going to affect every area of your life, and you won't know why, that
Mm,
you cannot fully come out and enjoy the richness and the fullness and the depth of
mm,
life that is there for all of us. Really, it's there for all of us.
mm. Extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary. So, I mean, it sounds like a platitude, but to even and
Mm,
contribute to what you're sharing with us, there is always this token of all conditions are temporary, all conditions are temporary, all conditions are temporary, that we're part of this evolutionary flow of the universal intelligence, and that
mm.
wherever the rawness, that deep, deep, deep primal feeling is, that we must go and meet it, but it will not last forever, because it's these
No.
qualities of experience are so intense, aren't they, that it feels, oh my God, how long will this go on? I mean, I can remember 7 or 8 years ago, 7 years ago, whatever, going through a crisis, a huge crisis, and experiencing the quality of grief that the crisis brought, the uncontrollable sobbing, where I would be moved to the floor into fetal, with the other part of me observing what was taking place and thinking, wait a minute, now you're a 65-year-old man. What, you've been here before, but not quite this. And it taught me two things, very basically. One, thank God for my spiritual practice over the last 45 years of
Yes.
meditation, because I know that my cells were able to yield me into that space, but also bring me back so that my
Mm.
neurology was repaired, because I was surprised by the unconscious nature of the way that my body took over. You women experience something a little bit more than I feel that we men do, because after all, your monthly cycle, or indeed the whole process of childbirth, where something happens in your body, there's no literal control. It's just something that happens. Whereas we men can control our bodies, except of course when, anyway, we won't go there. When suddenly sexuality arouses, and then it becomes something else, which a lot of men can't control until they've come. And rather than actually seeing the benefit of what that fusion of energies are all about. However, of just going deep into that space of dark, knowing full well that there are, as you were saying, on the other side of fear, there are all the indicators of our infinite potential. And that's why we're taken there, to get raw, to get naked, to get absolutely down to the very bone marrow of our beings, so that we can then
Mm.
supersede and come back. And you developed a quality of authenticity as a result, which was very
Mm.
bad, but at the same time contained in a way that you could operate within this crazy, crazy world.
Ooh, absolutely, Stuart. And I really love, I mean, one of the points of what you're sharing is something that I always share with everybody, is that, you know, this too shall pass. And there is everything within the moments of grief, whether it's grief, happiness, sadness, whatever it is, we can actually connect with the opposite of that emotion, even in the depths of our despair. There is that center of peace. There can be that connection with joy. It's not all or the other, because we live in a world of duality. There is always going to be the opposite contained within that moment, if we have the presence, which we don't always have, obviously, to be able to connect with that. But I really love this idea that we, and the knowing that we cannot know light and absolute joy if we haven't gone in there to the darkest spaces. And truly, I'm the happiest person I know, and I say that hands on my heart. And what a gift that I've been able to also know the other. Otherwise, I'd just be a Pollyanna.
Yeah. And I vouch for it, because I know that you have a quality of joy that is unique, and it
Yes,
feeds the whole vitality of you, which is really
yes.
exquisite. It's highly magnetic in the work, because people know that you've gone there, that you've been through it, but at the same time that you actually are, that you are the captain of your soul. You know that you are the
Mm.
mistress master of your whole destiny. I absolutely. So, in order to go into these extraordinary places and to find the healing that lies there, we come into the true vessel and spirit of what the meaning of authenticity is. What does authenticity mean for you?
I think it's in its essence, it's removing all that which is not who you really are. I think it's just the removal of everything that is not you. Sorry, there is a storm that's just started here, which is amazing. It's so loud.
Really?
It's
Wow.
extraordinary. But it is that removing away of everything that it is not our authentic self. How do we know that we have touched our authentic self? Suddenly, I think the path forward becomes very, very clear. So many people
Mm,
in life, they say that the meaning of life is understanding one's purpose. Well, we can't understand. Thank you. It stopped again. We can't understand our true compass north if we don't know who we are. I mean, that's
mm,
just 101.
mm,
And for me, there is a sense of peace with that authenticity and that awareness that I actually really, truly, in the deepest part of my being, like who I am today at almost 54. I love that I've gone through all of these journeys to come to this point and this time of my wisdom years, coming into the crone, and these gifts of the womb, that creative life force, that essence is now going into giving and creating for others, in service to others, rather than just the creative projects for myself.
mm. I just wanted to give a moment for that to sink in. That's really very beautiful.
Hmm.
And and of course, the other quality of your work was that you were immensely informed by the indigenous people of the South, the southern part of America.
Yes.
It's interesting, isn't it, that although you were living for most of your life in Australia, and I'm sure very much in touch with the indigenous people there, that it was the calling of the South that drew you, that the transposition of the eagle energy of the North for the condor of the South had opened up a pathway of healing, which of course has been the case for many, many people, particularly
Mm,
healing through plant medicine. And that is something that you've
yes.
experienced on a number of occasions and on a number of levels. Why do you feel that the South was
Mm.
so acute for you?
Well, it was the place where I first came into contact with plant medicine. And I have to say, honestly, Stuart, it was through my connection with the medicines of the earth that really allowed me to take a step back and understand what it means to be the witness. What you were experiencing, you said 5-7 years ago, when you had your dark night of the soul and you saw yourself in the fetal position as the witness. The medicines, specifically ayahuasca and wachuma, the San Pedro cactus, uh, they supported me in understanding what it is to step back from the emotional space that we all go into and move into. We are human, obviously, uh, and to be able to step back away from the machinations of the mind and the drama of the emotional life of what it is to be human, and just to be able to observe and to breathe and to understand from a much bigger picture, which is what you're talking about, this moment of the
Mm,
eagle, which is very strongly in your totemology. I know you know that, and being able to just see and and actually have compassion and love and understanding from a very different perspective for
mm,
oneself primarily.
mm,
So the
mm,
medicines of the earth were such important healers. The teachers, the Quiero of the Andes, as well as mainly the Shipibo of the Amazon, are such humble and such heart-centered, gorgeous people. And this is the important part. They were so open to working with a Westerner, to work with a Western woman. We don't often find that in the Australian Indigenous community for many reasons. So I didn't feel so connected to the Australian Indigenous people, but definitely, the doors, as soon as my feet started landing on American soil, South American soil, that's when my gifts really started to open up. That's when my voice started to open up through the work with plant medicine in a very,
mm,
very different way, because the medicines showed me that now you have to
mm,
start working with energy. It's not about
mm.
sounding good anymore. It's about channeling soundscapes that will support people's healing in whatever
Yeah,
way you need to, because it's not about me.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And in all of this landscape, both internally and externally, within your practice in the South, and working with the
Mm.
indigenous people, did the awareness of Atlantis awaken at all?
Yes, and then before that, Lemuria very strongly, because I know I went to Lake Titicaca and there was definitely that energy of Atlantis, but also Lemuria. And I
Mm,
actually connected with, I think he's still there, because one of my friends came, one of the only medicine men, shamans that were living there in Lake Titicaca, there in Peru, near Peru, Peru and Bolivia. And he took us to the gateway of the ascended masters. And the story goes, and I still have one of the rocks in my mesa, which is my traveling altar, beautiful white rock, a stone. And I asked permission, of course. And he said that all of those that had survived Atlantis are not, well, some of them, obviously, some of them went elsewhere. Many of them that survived Atlantis and Lemuria had come through to Peru. And it's a very strong part of their spiritual ancestral lineage as well, the Atlanteans and the Lemurians. So, yes, very much connected there. And we created, or he created, a beautiful ceremony for us there at that gateway, that portal of the ascended masters. Extraordinary,
yeah,
extraordinary.
yeah. Because this was my experience. I didn't go far south, but I was within the Yucatan Peninsula. Because many years ago,
Mm,
when the angels spoke to me, and I started to be, they said that I would be taught by them. What that meant was that when the student is ready, the masters come, you know. So there were seen and unseen beings on the path of life that suddenly would turn up. And one of them was Hunbat's mum, and Hunbat's was the keeper of the crystal.
Ah,
So I actually met him in Paris at a conference, but he said, "You must come," because he saw me immediately. As soon as he saw me, there was this extraordinary stillness, and he did this, and he said, "You have to come. You have to come." So we had these extraordinary conversations post-conference, and then, of course, you know, 2 months later, whatever it was, I was on an airplane to Yucatan, and he took me through Sweat Lodge. He took me through sacred ceremonies so that I was actually able to see the portals, as you have been, of the way that the Lemurian and Atlantean people traveled through and became the Mesoamerican indigenous peoples, whether it be the Mayan or the Aztec or indeed the Kogi, etc., etc.
mm,
Fascinating, fascinating. So there's an interconnection on the spirit line as well, because you know we can see that the Lemurian energies. I'm assuming something, so forgive me if this is an incorrect assumption. That the Lemurian energies were very much a conjuring of all of the elemental force of the earth that was, as it were, associated with the yin energy of feminine, whereas the Atlantean energy was much more
mm,
based on thought, was still very in
yes,
tune with the earth. And this is why you know, because I felt myself just magnetically drawn to Egypt because it was one of the major areas of colonization from Atlantis, and
yes,
masterminded by the being that's been talking to me for 50 years, who we know as Thoth. Who
yes.
I keep going back to and keep going back to. He was orchestrating the whole thing. Extraordinary. Anyway, so
Wow.
on that level, of course, you were led deep into the instrumentation of sacred ceremony. And
Yes.
one of the notions that I'd love to address is how you feel, because we know we're developing a discipline about our prayerfulness and our meditation and our
Mm,
presence. We're becoming more aware of that we need to be present, i.e., be conscious of the
mm,
interconnectivity of all things as we move, so that we're venerating and revering Mother Nature all the time. But at the same
yes.
time, I know you were introduced to some very remarkable practices that now you inculcate into all of your work.
Mm.
How important do you feel ceremony is?
Well, life is the ceremony, so I think it's very important, Look, I have a very strong and very disciplined way of opening sacred space, and then facilitating the process of what happens in these liminal spaces, and then a very strong process of closing down these spaces. For me, it's vital in any work, whether we're working with plant medicines or whether we are working through group processes, shamanic work, drum journeys, soul retrievals, whatever it is, that container and that acknowledgement of the intention setting of this, what it is and what it isn't, is actually called and claimed, because otherwise there's all sorts of energies that are around us. And I always say to people, if you don't name what your space is, then you better watch out, because then anything is going to enter this space, right? So for me, it's vital that we understand the energetic space of what we're holding, whether we're facilitating a workshop or we're going to share something with a group of people, or we're going to sing, that whether it's an internal or an external prayer, and a claiming of that energetic space, because as we claim it, so should it be. We know this is vital, absolutely vital. You know this, Stuart. I can feel it. I can see it. Of course, you know this.
I know. I'm merely opening up our conversation, feeling what other people may be interpreting as we speak. And
Mm,
you know, as an educator, meaning from the Latin to lead out, I'm always very conscious of the fact that I want the richness of what we're exchanging to be just grounded in what we may call spiritual technology. For example,
Yes.
we know prayer is absolutely extraordinary because it opens up our consciousness into the neural pathways of the divine. We know that meditation is absolutely crucial because most of our lives are spinning out. And if we don't actually have meditation, when do we have those moments to get still where the divine
Yes.
lives, as you keep saying, these pathways into the liminal? That if we're
Yes.
still, it begins to open so that we're conditioning our neurology so that we can interpret a new ideology, a new paradigm, and thereby create magnetically a new sociology. This is what's going to create a
Exactly.
brave new world. And it seems to me that you're, and of course other people who are working in a similar way to yourself, are really honoring the nature of ceremony. And so
Yes.
I'm saying to everybody out there who's listening, please take what we're saying absolutely seriously. We do not need to be in group to create ceremony. It is
No.
ritualizing your own presence through whatever mechanisms that you need so that you can feel yourself in connection with the divine. It's that ritualizing, isn't it, which is all about physicalizing an intention.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I love everything that you're sharing. Literally, we're creating heaven on earth when we're ritualizing a space through the art of ceremony. And when we this meeting at the, that we're sharing at the moment, Stuart, with all of you wonderful people that are here with us, this is about bringing meaning. And really, for me, how can we bring meaning to our lives? And for me, I found it's through ceremony. It's the small rituals,
Mm, mm,
because
mm,
as we know, it's the small rituals every day that create our lives.
mm.
And accompanying that with prayer, with that level of presence, not always asking. For me, prayer is also the deep gratitude of thank you. Here we are sharing this dance of life for however long we have the good fortune to be here, whatever your lot is, whatever you perceive your lot to be in this lifetime. What a gift it is to witness everything that we've witnessed thus far.
Mm, mm,
Unbelievable, the changes in technology and what we're seeing now. And it's going to be even more unbelievable, as time moves on. So we're in times that are very, very fast. And I think these times require us even more in the speed of them, in the depth of them, and the breadth of them, to be here now and to be present and reconnect, not only to ourselves, each other, and to the earth.
I hear you. I hear you. It's very extraordinary that you evoke this, because we know that with great, great love and great intention, many of our colleagues are spinning out on other ideas. And what
Mm,
you're sharing with us is the iridescence of what it is to be specific with the thought compass, but to become
yes.
really embodied. And the way to do this is through ceremony, because
Mm,
automatically it's almost as though a door, well, literally a door opens, as you well know, within circle. And as a result,
yes.
the unseen ones come in and you better be prepared. So the whole idea of having ceremony is that you revere the potentiality of what that experience is all about. And thereby everything has graciously been given its space. In,
Exactly.
in the Middle East, the spirit that we're talking about that can be cantankerous is known as the jinn, Jinn.
Yes, they're in Portugal as well.
Wow.
Yes.
They can be very, very powerful.
Oh, yes.
So I'm aware of seeing them, and I know that in ceremony in Egypt, particularly in going into these very unique ceremonies, like going into the Great Pyramid, into the King's Chamber, where we spend 2 hours chanting, and it's the core of the resurrection retreat. It's where resurrection really takes place, meaning that that everybody has the opportunity, if they wish, to lie in the sarcophagus. So we die to the old self, and therefore we're reborn into our divine blueprint. So I see all this incandescent stuff taking place, and move into an altered state of consciousness. So Stewart is no longer there. It is this other being. And many of the people that know me, who come because they want to be there with me, they say that I am not there, that this other being is there, that can be very stern and very austere because of holding the vitality of the cosmic, the cosmological energy that is being opened up. So there are
Yes.
these descriptions, but I know that in your traveling altar, which I think you described as your mesa, you have specific tokens
Mm,
that are really important for you because they reconnect you each time to the sacred. And of course, we know that that lives within just as it lives without.
yes.
Can you share with us what that might be? Because I'm asking
Mm,
everybody to be much more deliberate, to be much more
mm,
intentional about creating altar.
mm. So in my traveling altar, my mesa, which means table in Spanish, um, I have rocks actually of different lands that I've traveled to. Like for instance, I just asked for a rock from the Pilish Mountains here in Hungary because it's my ancestral land, and it was actually the place where the Teltosh, the shamans of my
Mm,
country here in Europe, well, here I am in Budapest in Hungary, that they used to do a lot of their rituals. The witches, the wise women, the herbalists would gather and they would share their medicine. So I collect rocks from various sacred portals that are of meaning. Recently, Ganesha appeared to me in a vision very, very strongly. So this, I now have a mini representation of Ganesha, as well as Green Tara, who is the goddess of healing, as we know. I have the representation of Pachamama and Pachapapa, which is Mother, Father, Earth. Um, I have different herbs. I always have a candle. There is a candle here that I've lit because we're opening sacred space, and the fire is the oldest element on our particular planet. So for me, having symbols that are meaningful, deities that you are personally connected to, and most importantly, and I'll share this with the audience, um, some of these artes or artifacts that I have and that I carry with, they could be a rock. They represent the deepest pains that I have transformed in my life into gifts of personal power.
mm,
So
mm,
my mesa, my altar is also a representation on a physical level, connecting with the spiritual level. It represents my personal medicine, my gifts and offerings into the world.
mm.
So every time
Wow,
I open her,
wow.
I connect with all the other mesa carriers all
Mm,
over the world. When
mm,
I close her up, she's energetically here and she's with me, and I can use her. I can work with her with my client sessions, but she's
mm,
always there. This mesa of mine, which is my personal power, and where I place the artes or the artifacts, also
mm,
then signifies how I would like to balance the energetic
mm.
space of the people that I'm working with one to one, and also that I'm working with in very, very large groups and ceremonies, workshops, and my trainings. So it's a powerful portal. It's a spiritual bridge between the physical and the spiritual.
Yeah,
It's a
yeah.
metaphoric bridge, should I say. And so there is so many layers to the messa. There's so many layers when we're really working with the altar. And in all traditions, whether you go to a Japanese household, a Chinese household, there is always the altar of the ancestors because they know how important it is. And here in the West, so many of us, unfortunately, have forgotten that we need to continue to honor our ancestors, because otherwise they're going to come up and Geek, 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 geek. Hello, you haven't healed this one.
And, and how right you are, how gosh, how accurate you are. And yet, what's interesting, and I'm sure it's occurring for many people who are listening in, because this will be a wonderfully electrified broadcast. It's going to draw a lot of people. That in the moment of hearing this, there is a memory. And
Yes.
so, although it appears to be forgotten, I've created a new concept, which is that it's unremembered, and that it's
Mm,
unremembered to come back in to be remembered,
mm,
so that we have true membership. And the way to do it, which is why I'm so pleased that the flow of our energy brought you brought you to what you've just shared with us, because the altar is so consequential, it seems to me, as it does to
yes,
you. It travels with me wherever I go, because it is the place where we are altered. And so I
yes.
love you also have elements of the old part of you, or the old parts of you, that are no longer demons. They're no longer soul fragments. They're actually re-energized, and therefore you are truly emergent in
Uh,
relation to whatever happens, as we move forward at this time. You
I
know,
mean, isn't that glorious? I mean, it's
it
just
is
so glorious. Perfection of, I wanted to share this because I think your viewers will find this. Well, I hope you find it interesting. I'm going to share it anyway. It's brief. I remember I was in a ceremony in Peru in the Andes, and one of my Quechua brothers was there. Beautiful, beautiful medicine man, carrier, wisdom carrier, and it was I was just about to finish the ceremony, and this was not long after I had lost Alakai, so I was still in the process of grieving. And very humble, Indian indigenous man, he comes up to me and he found this crystalline hollow rock, and he said, this represents your womb. And now, can you imagine? And now, I've placed different crystals within this metaphorical womb within my mesa, but he knew nothing about the experience. He knew nothing about the experience that I'd gone through, but he knew everything. He knew everything. And he also knew that here you are now. This is going to be one of your greatest gifts, this fabulous portal of creativity. Now let's see what you're going to really create here beyond this. Let's now see. That was also a beautiful full stop, coming back to self. Let's move forward, movement, and opportunity then to continue to be the mother to many.
I must, if I may, I must just add my own little story as well, because I've opened up the memory of the incident that took place, or the experience, I should say, not an incident, that took place 7 years ago. And I was taken to the very raw of me. And it just so happened that the news that led me into rawness took place when I was working in New Mexico, which is a very, very sacred space to me. It's where I spent in the early part of the 90s, where I met beautiful Painted Arrow, and I worked with him for 3 years. I would go back and kind of, so I went through Sweat Lodge and, sacred ceremony, and he was just extraordinary. He said he liked me because I taught dissension, not ascension, because at that time, people, the Ashtar command were floating in the air, and we were waiting to be transported or teleported into the ships, and the Earth was going to shift, because this was just all prior to the presenting of the equinox. And then we'd come back down, so we had a lot of people running to us saying, "Teach me how am I going to ascend? Do I go in my Merkaba in my body water?" And he would say, "You teach them how to descend." So anyway, so there I
I
was
love
in New
it.
Mexico. That was all at the beginning of the 90s, and yes, and this crisis took place, which was all to do with betrayal, because the love that I had with this particular individual was betrayed, and we were about to marry and all sorts of things. And I was staying with a very, very dear friend of mine, dear Nicholas, on the mesa just outside Santa Fe.
Mm.
And I had my own cabana, so it meant that I couldn't sleep because I was so hyper-adrenalized because of what was going on, that I would walk off into the mesa in the middle of the night, stark naked, and ask the Mother Moon, Grandmother Moon, if she would heal me. And I would do this every single night, and there was another dear friend of mine that I could call, who was on the other side of the country in North America, who kept me grounded with her love as well. However, it was always the feminine. But it was the full moon, and I remember standing, talking to Grandmother Moon, and I looked to my left, and I saw a shimmering silver, billowing shape moving towards me. A voice inside me said, "Are you delusional?" You know, I mean, this is a being who's been seeing spirit all his life. But as this vaporous form came towards me, very close, 15 feet away, it turned, and it was White Buffalo Calf Woman. And the love that poured into me
Oh.
made me drop to the floor, to my knees, the love, as she
Mm.
blessed. And then she was still
Wow.
there, but three hummingbirds came, one in the middle of the night, flowing right here. And I thought, oh, wow, wow. And then another came, and then another came, and the sweetness opened within me.
Oh.
So we are always, so
What a
I have that experience, you know, because she allowed me to take sand from the mesa where she stood, and I have the elemental consciousness of her luminescent light within the substance of sand.
Mm.
It's almost as though lightning struck. And you know, when lightning struck sand becomes crystallized.
Wow. Wow. Well,
And of
Stewart,
course,
I'm gonna go that is extraordinary because it brings me back to your question, which I couldn't quite answer as clearly as I will now because of what you shared. What is authenticity? It is the removal of everything that is not love and light. That's it. That's it. I could have just said it like that, right?
well, we needed to go through whatever we needed to go through to get to
That's
the point, you know,
extraordinary.
because what you've just uttered is crystalline.
Yes.
And so it's a ray of light that pierces into our consciousness as we share.
Yes.
But also because we're space gatherers, that
Mm,
actually it's gone into the consciousness of the
mm,
wonderful people who are listening in.
that is a
And it's
what a gift. You know, the
oh, oh,
hummingbird,
oh.
I mean, what a gift. But white buffalo calf woman for starters, and then the hummingbirds, to come from the space of, in the Andean medicine wheel, the hummingbird lives on the north, and she is the messenger of the ancestors and the bringer of love and the healer. I mean, how divine. And three, woof, incredible.
And after 10 days there, I flew to Toronto and taught in the way that I've never taught before, this
Mm,
group of actors. And then I went to LA, and whenever I'm in LA, I always honor the force of LA by driving along Sunset Boulevard all the way down to the Pacific coastline, where there is this unique lakeside shrine, which was where Yogananda, Paramahansa Yogananda,
oh,
ashram, and it's where he actually died, and Gandhi's ashes are there. So I always venerate, I always go and revere the space. It is the most extraordinary space. We have to go there. It is absolutely extraordinary.
I
And
would love
I walk this beautiful garden with a lake and swans and so forth. I walked in, and one of the monks came up to me and said, "Paramahansa wants you to have this."
that. Wow.
These are all pearls with titanium. So
Wow.
on my wrist ever since.
Amazing.
And it was
How
interesting because I
incredible.
remember White Buffalo Calf Woman saying there was an immense poetic, ritualized transmission that she gave me, because obviously she was speaking, but there were no
Mm,
audible words. She was
mm,
speaking within my psyche. And she said, you know, eventually your tears will turn to pearls. And here they
mm.
were. So when you speak of the remnant of the past, the demons, as it were, that led you to that space of rawness, so that you could then once more spring forth with great thanks for the transition, the transposition that had taken place, that we are given an understanding of the exquisite nature of what our tears bring forth, that they literally wash us clean.
Yes.
Oh my
Beautiful.
goodness. This has been the most extraordinary conversation from the very, very deep part of my soul and the core of my heart. I thank you. This is just
Oh,
amazing, 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 amazing.
darling
Um,
Stuart, I
that's
feel the same. I could talk to you for hours. I mean, it's just such a delight for me to be sitting in front of someone with so much depth and wisdom and intelligence as yourself, darling. It is always just food for my soul. Thank you.
Well, we have a unique connection, and I know we've been separate in our diaspora, working in different continents and gathering individuation process and all of the skills and awarenesses. And it seems, if I may say, that there's time for us at some point that we will come together and we'll create something together. And
I feel that.
that makes me weep, because
Yeah, so
that will
beautiful.
be one of the greatest joys. And maybe it needs to be on those latitudes, the
Mm,
Atlantean, Southern American latitudes. Maybe it needs to be in the Dominican Republic,
wow. That would be incredible.
which is the home of Larimar, which is the Atlantis stone. Anyway, there's a lot of
Wow.
information that's coming through about that. And there's also someone living there who is like a daughter to me, whom you've never met, and I would love to introduce you to, because I'm sure that you and she will go, "Boom!" And that will also be a space for you. I think I may have talked about it. That will be a
You
space
have.
for
Yes.
holding a sacred retreat, because
Yes.
it's a Spanish speaking island, so she's very much in connection with what's taking place further west,
Mm,
in Mesoamerica, and has many shaman there
mm,
engaging in ayahuasca ceremony or whatever. Anyway,
mm.
Beata, on behalf of everybody, thank you profoundly for all the work that you do. And we will close the transmission now. So I know we're both joining in celebration of all those people who are tuning in and knowing
Yeah.
full well that you have been naked in this space in spirit as you've shared with us. And so
Mm.
therefore, take this information and hold it deep within your heart. And we look forward to meeting you again, whether it be in spirit or on earth. Namaste, namaste, namaste.